Please, just look at it, Grant. I spent 3 months on this. I redesigned the entire atrium so the light would. He didn't look up from his phone. I need you to stop doing this, Serena. You're not on this project. You're not on any project. You haven't been for 2 years, and there's a reason for that. The drawings were spread across the kitchen island. 3 months of work, detailed renderings of the Lakeshore Cultural Center, the development that had made Grant Holloway one of the most talked-about names in Toronto real estate. Serena had redesigned the central atrium from scratch, on her own time, in the small office upstairs that Grant referred to as her hobby room. She had solved the sightline problem that his firm had been struggling with for 5 months. She knew she had. The geometry was clean, the structural logic was sound, and the natural light patterns would shift through the space across the day in a way that made the building feel alive. Grant picked up his coffee, walked past the drawings without glancing down, and stopped at the hallway mirror to check his tie. "I'm bringing Allegra to the harborfront reveal tonight," he said. His voice was casual, the kind of casual that has weight behind it. "She's been helping me with the public-facing side of things. Branding, image, the stuff that actually moves the needle." Serena stood at the island with her hands still resting on the drawings. Allegra Voss was a lifestyle influencer with 1.2 million followers and a talent for standing next to important men at important events. She had appeared at Grant's office 3 months ago, and since then her name had surfaced in conversation with increasing frequency. Branding, image, networking, always a professional reason, always delivered with the same flat ease, as if Serena were being unreasonable for noticing. "You could bring me," Serena said. "I'm your wife. I designed the atrium revisions that your team couldn't figure out. I could actually speak to what the building does." Grant turned from the mirror. He looked at her the way you look at someone who has made an embarrassing suggestion at a dinner party. "Serena," he said slowly, "you're an architect who stopped practicing. That's not a credential. That's a hobby. You sit upstairs and draw things nobody asked for. Allegra understands how to be in a room. You understand how to disappear in one." He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. "The reveal is at 8. I'll be back late. Don't wait up." He walked out. The front door closed with the particular sound of a man who had already stopped thinking about the person he was leaving behind. Serena did not move. Her hands stayed on the drawings. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of his car pulling out of the drive. She looked down at her work. The atrium sketches were beautiful. She knew this not with arrogance, but with the particular clarity of someone who had spent 4 years at the University of Waterloo and 3 more apprenticing under one of the most demanding principals in the country before she had quietly, gradually, piece by piece, folded her entire career into a drawer so that Grant could be the only architect in the room. It had started small. The way these things always do. He suggested she take time off after their wedding. "You've been grinding since undergrad," he said. "Take a breath. Enjoy the house." Then the time off became a pattern. Then the pattern became an identity. She stopped attending industry events because Grant said they made him feel like he was competing with his own wife. She stopped submitting to competitions because he said it looked strange for both of them to be in the same space professionally. She stopped talking about her work at dinners because the table always went quiet when she did, and Grant would change the subject with a laugh that was never quite a joke. 2 years. She had not drawn a single professional line in 2 years, until 3 months ago, when she had found the Lakeshore plans spread across Grant's desk and seen the atrium problem immediately. The fix had come to her in the shower the next morning, fully formed, like a language she had never actually forgotten. She had spent 3 months refining it in secret, thinking, what, that he would see it and remember what she could do? That he would bring her back into the work, into the room, into the version of herself she had been before she started asking permission to exist? She pressed her palms flat against the renderings. Hobby. The word sat in her chest like a stone dropped into still water. She walked upstairs to the office. Her drafting table was pushed against the window. Outside, the Toronto skyline caught the last of the afternoon light, glass and steel and concrete shaped by people who had not stopped practicing. She sat down in the chair. She did not cry. She had learned a long time ago that crying in this house changed nothing. Grant did not respond to tears. He responded to silence by filling it with himself, and he responded to tears by leaving the room. She picked up her phone and scrolled to a name she had not called in months. Jude Achebe. He had been a fellow apprentice at Moreau and Partners. They had spent 2 years side by side, pulling all-nighters over competition entries, arguing about cantilevers and materiality, and whether concrete could feel warm. Jude had gone on to start his own studio in Vancouver, which had grown into one of the most respected mid-size firms in Western Canada. He still emailed her every few months. She never replied. She pressed call. He answered on the second ring. Serena. His voice was immediate, open, surprised in a way that sounded like relief. I was starting to think you'd changed your number, she exhaled. Something in her shoulders released at the sound of someone who remembered her as a person with capabilities. I need to tell you something, she said. And I need you to just listen, she told him. Not everything, not the full map of the last 2 years, but enough. The drawings. Grant's reaction. The reveal tonight. The word hobby used like a door being closed on her hands. Jude was quiet for a long time after she finished. Not the silence of someone thinking of what to say, the silence of someone deciding what to do. Serena, he said carefully, I've watched you disappear for 2 years. I didn't say anything because I thought it was your choice and I was trying to respect that. But what you just described to me is not a choice. That's a cage someone convinced you was a house. She pressed her free hand against her forehead. The harborfront reveal tonight, he said. Is it open to industry? She paused. It's a gala event. Grant's firm is unveiling the lakeshore designs publicly. There'll be press, developers, city councilors. I know 3 people on that guest list, Jude said. I can get you in. Not as Grant's wife, as Serena Whitfield, the architect who solved a problem his entire team couldn't. She almost said no. The idea of walking into that room, the same room Grant would be standing in with Allegra, with her renderings that he had refused to look at, with 2 years of silence strapped across her back. The idea was absurd. But something had shifted in the last hour. Something small and structural, like a load-bearing wall being identified for the first time. She had spent 2 years thinking she was the problem, that she was too quiet, too technical, too much of the wrong thing for the life Grant was building. And then today he had looked at her work, her real work, the kind of work she had trained her entire adult life to produce, and called it a hobby. That was not a reflection of her, that was a confession about him. Okay, she said. Her voice was steady in a way that surprised her. I'll be there. Bring the drawings, Jude said. All of them. The line went quiet. Serena set the phone down and looked at the drafting table. The office was small. Grant had given her the smallest room in the house, the one with the odd angles and the single window, because it was the room he had no use for. She had made it hers anyway. Pinned sketches to the walls. Stacked reference books on the floor. Taped a photo of her thesis project above the desk. The one that had won the Governor General's medal. The one Grant had suggested she take down from the living room, because it made guests feel like she was showing off. She stood up and went to the closet. At the back, behind coats she hadn't worn in a year, was a garment bag. Inside was a dress she had bought for an awards ceremony she had never attended. Deep emerald silk, architectural in cut, structured at the shoulders and fluid through the body. She had seen it in a shop window on Queen Street and known immediately that it was designed by someone who understood how fabric could hold a line. She unzipped the bag. The silk moved in her hands like something patient. She slipped into it and walked to the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back was not the woman who had stood in the kitchen an hour ago, with her palms flat on ignored drawings. This woman had edges. This woman took up space without apology. She did her makeup slowly. Clean lines, sharp contour, a deep whine at her lips that she had not worn since before the wedding. She let her hair fall naturally, the way it did when she stopped straightening it into the smooth, contained shape Grant preferred. It was full and dark and it framed her face the way it had in every photo from before. She gathered the drawings into a portfolio case, 12 sheets, 3 months of work. The solution to a problem that a team of 14 had failed to crack. She called a car. Going out, Mrs. Holloway? The driver asked when she stepped outside. Yes, she said. The Harborfront Event Center. She did not explain further. The Harborfront reveal was the kind of Toronto evening where the architecture mattered less than the people photographed in front of it. The event space overlooked the lake, floor-to-ceiling glass on 3 sides. the city skyline reflected in the water beyond. Grant's firm had spent a considerable amount on the staging, scale models under spotlights, projection screens showing fly-through animations, a string quartet playing something tasteful and forgettable. Grant was near the center of the room. Allegra, beside him, blonde, tall, photogenic, in the practiced way of someone who had studied her own angles. She was laughing at something a city councilor had said, her hand resting on Grant's arm with the specific pressure of a woman marking territory. Grant looked comfortable. He always did in rooms like this. He was a man built for public settings, for handshakes and eye contact, and the particular Toronto version of charm that involves saying very little while appearing to say everything. Jude was waiting near the east entrance. He was wearing a dark gray suit with an open collar, and when he saw Serena come through the doors with the portfolio case under her arm, he stopped mid-conversation and stared. "Good Lord," he said quietly. She laughed. "A real one. Not performed, not careful, the kind that escapes before you can manage it." "You brought everything?" he asked. "Everything." They walked in together. Jude moved through the room the way architects move through spaces they understand, reading the sightlines, noting the structural choices, registering what the room was doing to the people inside it. He introduced Serena to a developer from Montreal, a city planner she had admired for years, a journalist from the Globe who was covering the Lakeshore project. At each introduction, he said the same thing. "This is Serena Whitfield. She trained at Moreau and Partners. She has something you're going to want to see." Serena felt the shift in herself with each conversation. The words came back, the vocabulary, the spatial reasoning articulated out loud, the confidence of knowing exactly what she was talking about, because she had studied it and practiced it and earned it. She was not performing, she was remembering. Across the room, Grant noticed. He had been mid-sentence with a potential investor when his eyes tracked across the crowd and landed on the woman in the emerald dress. The recognition was not immediate. His brain processed the shape of her before the identity. Tall, striking, carrying herself with the specific posture of someone who belonged in every room she entered. Then it caught up, Serena. His champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. She was talking to Martin Devereaux, the city's chief urban planner. She was gesturing with one hand, the other holding a rolled drawing. Martin was leaning in, nodding, his expression the particular kind of focus that meant he was hearing something that mattered. Grant set his glass down. "Who told her about tonight?" Beside him, Allegra followed his gaze. She studied Serena for a moment without speaking. Her expression did something complicated and private. "Is that your wife?" she asked. Grant did not answer. Jude had arranged a small table near the model display. Serena unrolled the drawings one by one. The first sheet showed the existing atrium design, with its sightline problems annotated in red. The second showed her solution. The third, fourth, fifth, detailed renderings, section cuts, light studies showing how the natural illumination would move through the space across 12 hours. A small crowd gathered, not because anyone had announced anything, but because the drawings were extraordinary, and people in this room knew enough to recognize it. Martin Devereaux stood at the edge, his arms crossed, studying the light analysis. "This solves the ventilation issue too," he said. "Your husband's team has been going back and forth on this for months." Serena's voice was steady. "I know. I've been working on it at home." "At home," Martin repeated. He looked at her. "Why aren't you on the project?" The question landed in the room like a glass being set down too hard. Several people glanced toward Grant, who was now standing 15 feet away, close enough to hear, too far to intervene without making it obvious. Serena met Martin's eyes. "That's a good question," she said. She did not elaborate. She did not need to. The silence did the work. Grant crossed the room. His stride was measured, controlled, the walk of a man who has realized he is losing something in public and is trying to manage the optics. "Serena," he said. His voice was warm, public warm. "What a surprise. I didn't know you were coming." She looked at him, no anger, no trembling, just the clear, level gaze of someone who was finished pretending. "I redesigned your atrium, Grant. I brought the drawings. Your chief planner seems to think they solve problems your team has been struggling with for 5 months. Grant glanced at the renderings. His jaw moved. She could see him processing. Not the architectural merit of the work, but the social mathematics of the moment. His wife, whom he had told to stay home. his wife whose career he had quietly folded into a closet, standing in his event, showing his guests a solution that made his entire team look like they had been wasting time. He started. Jude stepped forward. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Grant, I've known Serena since we were both 23, pulling all-nighters at Moreau's studio. She was the most gifted spatial thinker I'd ever worked beside. She won the Governor General's Medal before she was 25, and for the last 2 years, she's been sitting in a room you gave her, the smallest room in your house, drawing solutions to problems your firm bills millions to solve, and you've been calling it a hobby. The small crowd was very still. I didn't come here to embarrass you, Jude continued. I came because Serena's work deserves to be seen by people who understand what they're looking at, and I'm done watching her hide it. He turned to Serena. His expression changed. The professional composure softened into something unguarded. I need to say something I should have said 2 years ago, he said. I watched you step back from everything you'd built, and I told myself it was your decision, and I should respect it. But I've spent 2 years wishing I'd said something. Wishing I'd told you that your work changed the way I think about space and light, that every project I've done since Moreau's has your fingerprints on it somewhere. Because you taught me to see things I wouldn't have seen alone. He held her gaze. I don't want to watch from a distance anymore. I want to work beside you again. I want to build something with you. Not as your husband's colleague, as someone who knows exactly who you are and has known it from the start. The air between them held. Grant felt it the way you feel the ground shift during a tremor. Not dramatic, not violent. Just the quiet, irreversible sensation of something foundational moving beneath your feet. Allegra was standing 5 feet behind him. She had heard everything. She had watched the drawings. She had watched the crowd lean in. She had watched the way Serena held a room without once raising her voice or performing a single moment of spectacle. Allegra was not an architect, but she understood power, and she understood when it had changed hands. She touched Grant's elbow. He turned. I don't think I can do this, she said. Her voice was low, private. Do what? This, she gestured between them. Whatever this is. Because what I just saw was a man standing 10 feet from his wife's brilliance and calling it a hobby. And if that's how you see talent, I don't want to know how you see me when the cameras aren't on. She picked up her clutch. She did not make a scene. She did not raise her voice. She simply turned and walked through the crowd toward the exit, heels clicking on the polished concrete with the steady rhythm of a woman who had made a clean decision. Grant stood alone. The crowd had not dispersed. The drawings were still on the table, still extraordinary, still solving a problem that bore his firm's name. Serena looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was kind, which was somehow worse than anger. I'll have my lawyer contact yours this week, she said. I think we both know this has been over for a long time. She turned to Jude. He was watching her with an expression that was not surprise. It was recognition, the look of someone seeing a person finally arrive at a place they had always belonged. She took his arm. They walked together through the crowd, past the scale models and the string quartet and the city skyline reflected in the dark water beyond the glass. Someone from the Globe approached them near the terrace. She had been taking notes. Miss Whitfield, she said, I'd love to do a piece on your atrium redesign. Would you have time this week? Serena smiled, a real one. Call my office, she said. Then she paused because she didn't have an office, not yet. Jude leaned in. You do now, he said quietly. I've had a desk waiting for you in Vancouver for 2 years. But I suspect you're going to want to build something of your own right here in Toronto. She looked at him. The lake was dark behind them, the city lit up above it, and for the first time in longer than she could measure, the skyline felt like something she was part of rather than something she was watching from behind glass. I think I'd like that, she said. The divorce was finalized in 19 days. No disputes, no prolonged negotiations. Grant's lawyer called Serena's lawyer, and the conversation lasted 12 minutes. There was nothing to contest. Grant had spent 2 years making sure Serena had no professional footprint, no income, no public presence. His lawyer had assumed this would be leverage. Serena's lawyer, a woman named Iris Cheng, who had been practicing family law in Toronto for 22 years, looked at the numbers and said 3 words. We have everything. The atrium redesign was adopted by the City Planning Committee 6 weeks after the gala. Grant's firm received the contract, but the public record listed Serena Whitfield as lead design consultant. The Globe ran the profile. It was titled, "The Architect in the Smallest Room," and it traced her career from the Governor General's medal through her quiet disappearance from the profession and her return at the harborfront reveal. The journalist had interviewed Martin Devereaux, who said on the record, "I have seen very few people solve a spatial problem with that level of elegance." The fact that she did it alone, without resources, without support, in what her husband apparently called a hobby room, tells you everything you need to know about the talent we almost lost. The article was shared 11,000 times in the first week. Serena's inbox filled with messages from architects across the country, many of them women, many of them telling her versions of the same story. "I stopped too, I made myself smaller, I forgot what I could do. You reminded me." She opened her own studio 4 months later. A small space on Dundas' second floor, good light. She hired 2 junior architects and a project manager. Jude flew in from Vancouver for the opening. He brought a bottle of wine and a framed print of her thesis project, the one Grant had asked her to take down. "This goes above your desk," he said. She hung it herself. They did not rush. They had spent 2 years in a silence that was not absence, but patience. Their first dinner alone was at a small restaurant on Ossington, the kind of place with 14 tables and a handwritten menu. They talked for 3 hours, about cantilevers, about a competition in Zurich they had both wanted to enter 10 years ago, about the specific way light behaves when it passes through perforated steel. At some point, Serena realized she was laughing without thinking about it, not managing the sound, not checking whether it was too loud or too much, just laughing because something was funny, and because the person across from her found her funny, had always found her funny, and had been waiting quietly for the chance to sit across from her and hear it. Jude reached across the table and took her hand. He did not make a speech. He just held it, and the warmth of it was so simple and so foreign, after years of cold, that she had to look away for a moment to keep from breaking apart. Grant read the Globe article on his phone in the condo he had moved into after the divorce. It was a glass tower on the waterfront, the kind of building that looks impressive from the outside and feels like nothing from within. Allegra had stopped returning his calls 3 days after the gala. She had posted a single photo on her account, a sunset, no caption, no location, and then unfollowed him. He understood the language. He read the article twice. He looked at the photo of Serena, standing in her new studio, smiling with her arms crossed, blueprints visible on the wall behind her. He had not known about the Governor General's medal. He had known, technically, she had mentioned it once, early on, but he had not retained it because it had not been about him. He stared at the photo for a long time. The woman in it was not someone he recognized, and that was the thing that hollowed him out. Not that she had changed, that she had returned to who she had always been, and he had never once looked carefully enough to see it. 9 months after the divorce, Serena won her first independent commission. A community library in Scarborough, modest in scale, extraordinary in design. The building used natural ventilation and light wells that drew from techniques she had developed in the atrium redesign. It was featured in Canadian Architect and shortlisted for a national award. Jude proposed on a Tuesday evening. They were in her studio after hours, takeout containers on the drafting table, blueprints pushed to one side. He set a small box on top of a section drawing and said, "I've been carrying this for 3 weeks and I keep waiting for the right moment, but I think the right moment is just whenever I'm with you." She said yes before he finished the sentence. They got married the following spring in a small ceremony at a farmhouse north of the city, 30 guests. No gala, no staging, no performance. Her mother cried. Jude's brother gave a toast that made everyone laugh. Serena wore a simple white dress and her hair the way it naturally fell, and when Jude saw her walk toward him across the grass, he put both hands over his face and stood there shaking until she reached him and pulled his hands away. 14 months later, their son was born. They named him Ezra. He had Serena's dark eyes and Jude's habit of studying everything in a room before deciding what to do with it. When he was old enough to sit up on his own, Serena would bring him to the studio and set him on the floor beside her desk, and he would watch the light move across the wall with the quiet attention of someone already learning how space worked. Grant saw the wedding announcement in the same national paper that had run the profile. A small notice, no photo. He was sitting alone in his condo. The Lakeshore Cultural Center had been completed, but the opening had been delayed twice due to structural issues in the East Wing. Problems that, as several reviewers noted, would not have existed if the original atrium design had been adopted from the start. He set his phone down on the counter. The condo was very quiet. Lake Ontario was visible through the glass, flat and gray, and stretching to a horizon that offered nothing to look at. He had spent 2 years telling a woman who could shape the way light moved through a room that she was not qualified to be in one. He had called her work a hobby. He had given her the smallest room. He had walked past her drawings without looking down, and she had looked at those drawings, and then she had looked in the mirror, and she had decided to stop being the person he had made her into and start being the person she had been all along. Serena Whitfield had never needed permission. She had needed one evening, one phone call, one portfolio case, and a room full of people who understood what they were seeing. She built it, all of it. The studio, the library, the marriage, the life. She built it the way she built everything, with clean lines and honest materials, and the kind of structural integrity that does not require anyone else's approval to stand. And she never once walked back into the smallest room.